I fear for any woman who gets close to Charlie Kirk because of his views, his political views, and his perceptions of what women are and how they should live their lives.
But like, so when you say you fear for those women,
Yeah.
fear of what? Like violence?
His opinion is so hurtful to so many women that, like, if you're a woman who believes in what he believes in,
I do.
I just fear for.
I'm sorry.
I just fear a little bit for you because the
In
men.
what way, though? What are you fearful of?
The men who believe in Charlie Kirk's views are often more violent, more upsetting, more rigorous, and more conservative. And if you're a woman who believes in all of that, then you're probably fine.
So just to be clear, you're saying that...
However...
You're saying that men who believe in Charlie Kirk's views are more violent?
Yeah.
And is there like... How do you come to this conclusion?
You know Andrew Tate?
No, I've never heard of him.
Andrew Tate is very similar to Charlie Kirk.
Are they?
Yes. I think they'd be
How?
great friends.
How are they similar?
Political views, ideals, energies,
Misogynist.
So
and
could you
misogynistic
Yeah,
ideals.
womanizer.
Well, okay, hold on.
And you know,
a couple things. Yeah. Go ahead.
You know,
Keep going.
I bet Charlie Kirk's wife believes in everything he says, and I hope she's doing really good. That's, Miss Arizona. Arizona is a very interesting area.
Sure.
And I bet she's totally fine with it. However, I fear she never has to face anything that's violent or upsetting, and I just hope that she lives a great life.
Are you suggesting that Charlie Kirk's wife is at risk of violence at Charlie Kirk's hands?
Maybe not even his hands, but I bet he has a lot of friends who are dangerous and upsetting.
You're saying somebody in Charlie Kirk's circle
Yes.
has a high likelihood of assaulting Charlie Kirk's wife?
I'm not saying that per se, but
Sounds like what you're saying.
I would not feel comfortable in a room with Charlie Kirk and his friends.
Okay.
But I bet his wife does. I bet his wife's very comfortable where she is. So I hope I'm just saying I hope she's happy.
Sure. Would you feel more comfortable in a room with like Destiny or like some other liberal?
I don't know who that is.
You don't know who Destiny is?
No.
What about like Harry Sisson or whatever?
Harry the TikToker?
Yeah, Harry Sisson, like
Yeah.
Democrat?
Yeah.
Okay. Huh. Now, I'm a little confused, though. You said Charlie Kirk and Andrew Tate are similar.
I do feel they are similar.
Can you be more specific? In what ways are they similar?
Violence, even if it's not violence physically, like political violence against women.
Just hating women.
Can you clarify what you mean by political violence?
I think they would share a lot of similar views about abortion and
Wait,
marriage.
can you move your microphone this way and just no, scoot it this way? Scoot it. No. This way. Here, just.
I'm following your thumbs.
But you're moving it too much. I'm just trying to get it aligned with.
Right here?
No, this way.
This way more?
Can you try to be like straight with the table?
She's too tall.
Okay, that's fine.
Like this?
Political violence how?
Andrew Tate and Charlie Kirk have both expressed, issues against women's rights.
Well, okay, we need to separate Andrew Tate and Charlie Kirk.
Yeah.
I think they have very different views. I would categorize Charlie Kirk.
Oh, Andrew Tate is worse.
So Andrew Tate and Charlie
by worse,
Kirk.
I mean Andrew Tate is more aggressive towards his hate towards women and his disrespect towards women, and Charlie Kirk tries to hide it behind Christianity. However, they both, I think, value women less than the normal man. And that's what I mean. That's what I mean. They're similar.
Sure. What has led you to believe? So
everything they say.
Well, I'm going to keep it to Charlie Kirk because
Okay.
it's easier for me to do it this way. What specifically has Charlie Kirk said that would lead you to believe that?
That he doesn't want women to get abortions.
But you said that something about like equal rights, or
That is
or no,
an
you said
equal
that
right.
he doesn't view women as equal or as having the same value as men.
Yeah.
Okay, how so?
Even just saying that women shouldn't be allowed to have an abortion is assuming that they have less rights than men. The right to their bodily autonomy, like their autonomy.
Well, I'm sure some of the people on the panel want to weigh in on that, but okay, so abortion. Don't you actually think, though, do you consider yourself a feminist?
No.
No?
No, I'd consider myself a misandrist.
So a feminist?
No.
Well, what's the difference between a feminist and a misandrist?
A feminist believes that everyone is equal. A misandrist believes that women are actually better than men.
How are they better than men?
Hold on. So just to be clear, you are making accusations that, well, my understanding of misandry, that would be female supremacy, which I guess could fall under the categorization of misandry. But do you hate men?
No.
So misandry, what is misandry?
So misogyny is what's been going on for a really long time, where men are better than women. Men deserve more power than women. Men are smarter than women. Men are stronger than women, blah, blah, blah. Misandry believes, I think in a perfect world, women would be in charge of everything. And if you look at countries that are happier and better off, women are more in charge. And I'm not saying that men suck. Men are great. Men are needed. I'm not saying we should kill all men, whatever. Like I don't support that whole message. However, if you look at countries that are doing better, women are in charge of a lot of the government. And I think women, because of the system that men have created, which is unfair, men are taught to be more masculine and strong and whatever. However, if we were all taught to be equal, I'd be a feminist. However, because women have been taught to be more empathetic, a lot of women are just better at handling political and social problems.
Okay, there's a lot there. Let's start with your claim that you're saying that there are countries where there is a predominance of female leadership and these countries are better.
Yeah.
Okay, which countries are those?
A lot of the Scandinavian countries, like I think Copenhagen and like Scandinavian countries.
Copenhagen is the capital of Denmark.
Yeah.
It's not a country, but
Denmark.
Are you talking?
Sweden?
I'm just talking about Scandinavian.
I think
Scandinavian areas are known to be the happiest places on earth.
And so you're saying those countries are not patriarchies?
A lot of them, yeah.
You're saying the Scandinavian countries are not patriarchies?
I'm not saying that exactly, but I know they have a lot more women in control than the U.S. does, which right now the U.S. is predominantly
controlled by old men.
Yeah,
and you're
controlled by old men.
Sure, and you're saying that these Scandinavian countries, strictly, there's no other factors that might contribute to them being, at least from your worldview, better countries.
Such as what?
I don't know, you're the one making the claim. How are they better countries?
Well, the women are in charge and they create rules that are more good for the people of the country rather than the rich people of the country. I'm not totally versed on this subject. However, based on what I've seen, the countries of the world that have more female leaders are the people in those countries are happier and more well off than the women or just the people in like the US right now, for example.
How so?
They get health care. They get
free health care.
Free health care, free just care in general. Women get better maternity leave. Everyone is saying that they're happier in those countries. Like, I'm pretty sure Denmark or somewhere just got voted like happiest place on earth for 2025. And it's a place run by women.
And you're saying, like, for example, if we look at Norway, I believe is a country of, 4 or 5 million? Something around that. You're saying because there's more female leadership in some of these Scandinavian countries that because simply by virtue of that, that's why these countries enjoy like more prosperity or are better.
Yeah.
Okay. You
I
don't
do
think
believe
like,
that.
for example, with Norway, it might have to do with their like abundance of natural resources and they're
But you don't think that's because the women who rule that country and who help that country have protected those? Donald Trump has taken away so many of our natural resources already, and people are already unhappy about that.
Well, I can't speak specifically my understanding is this, as it relates to Norway's natural resources, the sort of prosperity that has granted its citizenry has been in place for many, many decades.
Very good for
I'm
that.
assuming prior to even the increasing representation of women in its government body.
Okay.
So I'm not sure that has the prosperity of Norway, for example, has anything to do with like current day, perhaps increased representation of women in government.
However, if you look at the countries that have had increases in women governments and you look at the ones who have had decrease and who have had predominantly men, you can see a vast difference in the amount of environmental protectionism acts and other things that have to do with women's health, child health, anything to do with like the goodness of the people. I think, and although again, I'm not saying that men are a problem, because I know lots of great men. It's just when countries rely on only men for power, I think that's dangerous. And in a world where feminism is seen as a bad thing because feminism means only women, I'm going to stick up for only women. Because a lot of men who claim to be feminists, or women who even claim to be feminists, still side with like the way things are right now, because things are better now than they were in like the 60s.
A couple clarifying questions here. You cited to Scandinavian countries.
Yeah.
Would you say that these women who are there's a greater representation of women in the government, are they typically white?
I don't think it matters, but
Why would it not matter?
because
Those
I don't
countries are
think
white.
race matters with power, but
Yeah, gender does.
A lot of Scandinavian countries are predominantly
But so
white.
I'm just curious, why are you saying these countries are better because there's more women in power? Why wouldn't you just make that claim about it's better because of white women?
Because I think even Africa or Somalia would do better with a black woman leader than the leader they have currently.
Okay, so going back to your claim about misandry, can you again explain to me, when you say you're a misandrist, what does that mean?
I believe that women have greater intellectual capabilities than men do. They have a better way to lead, and they are more, and I know a lot of men say women are more emotional. I think they're just more sympathetic and empathetic to groups of people.
Okay, and what are men? So if
As
women,
what I've seen from the world, men are more interested in power than
And
they
women-
are in the goodness of their country.
men more interested in power.
And I think women are more interested in making sure that their country is taken care of. And that could be wrong. I'd love for a man to prove me wrong. And some men have proven me wrong in certain countries. However, in the vast majority of like the biggest countries, it's been scary to see only men in power saying that women can't be in power because of their emotions, where men make all the emotional destructive decisions.
What are some of those?
War.
What if I told you that if there was a study, for example, and there is, that they did an analysis of female monarchs, female queens.
Okay.
And they actually found that the female queens,
in
hold on,
when?
you got to let me finish.
1600s?
I don't recall the specific date range, but monarchs, right? So they found that female queens were much more likely to wage war than kings. So this would seem to indicate there's perhaps a greater propensity for violence actually in women.
Well, you know, one story I know of is one of the queens of France created a war against, I think it was Spain or Italy or something, because her husband created unfair decisions between those two. I think it was like the queen of something Medici or something like that. I forget her full name. I can't speak Italian or
The
whatever.
Medicis?
Yeah.
So
I
the
know
Italians,
one
okay.
queen. I know one queen did wage war before her husband because her husband died in war, and she wanted to restore peace. And I know war is a big thing, but if you look at the history of the world, way more wars have been started by men, and it's kind of an unfair study to say more women have started wars than
I would look at
men
per
when
capita.
you look at but per capita per when, because women were often controlled by men's decisions. Even if they were queen, they were told what to do.
Just to be clear, the queen was told what to do?
Yes.
So both kings and queens have counselors, but they're never told what to do.
Yeah.
They have ultimate
Were
power.
you there?
Were you there?
No. But
Well, how would you?
I've
Then
heard
how would
many
you be able to make the claim? How?
Because
how would
you
that,
know, it's just clear that
How is
the
it
women
just
who are
clear?
in power were not actually in power because of stories they've told, stories we've heard of different men telling them, like, by the way, you should do this, because just because you're queen doesn't mean you have political knowledge passed down from you from generations. Multiple queens were sold to kings to, like, just be there.
Wait, hold on. So just to be clear, okay. So you have the queen who's married to the king who's in power.
But, like, which queen are you talking about?
Hold on. So the monarchy can pass down through hereditary lines.
It's always to the son, though.
Right, but if there is no son, it goes to the daughter. Right, and we've seen this all throughout history. If you look at England, for example, there are plenty of queens.
When?
You mean the one that was in power, like the one that just died?
Yeah, the queen.
Yeah, the queen.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then there was Queen. I'm not an expert in like the monarchies of England and Britain, but I believe was it Queen Victoria, Queen Elizabeth? So
the Queen of England.
Yeah, the Queen of England. So there's been plenty of queens who, it wasn't just like thrust upon them through marriage. They became the queen through hereditary lines.
But a majority of queens come through marriage lines because even if you're the eldest daughter, the castle, the royalty line goes to the oldest son.
But if there is no eldest son or the son dies, then yes.
Well, then they kept trying for a son as much as they could.
Yeah, sure. Sometimes.
But they would teach the queen, you have to start a war. You have to do these things that a man would do.
The count? Who?
I don't know.
If all women were involved in being like not just one queen, there wouldn't be any wars. There's still wars because all the other men are out there trying to fight. So if it was all women queens,
there's no way to actually prove it because you'd have to go back in time and change the course of history.
What do you mean?
I believe that if women were in charge for most of the world, there'd be way less war than there is today.
So, but what... You think that, but that's just an assertion.
Okay.
What's the argument for why that would be?
Because we've only had wars really attacked and chosen by men in this current day and age.
There's been plenty, again,
Name one.
Historically, I don't have live recall for like a specific war that some queen in the 16th century started.
Exactly.
Okay.
Argentina, Thatcher, Margaret.
You got to speak into the mic. Please.
Margaret Thatcher, Argentina. She started the war. Margaret Thatcher started the war, taking the Malvina Islands from Argentina. I'm Argentina. I know that part of the story. She was a woman, and she motivated, and she started a war. Not to be against you, but it just came to my mind.
Of course.
There's many women.
War was started for?
Excuse me?
Do you know what the war was started for?
For the islands. The Malvinas Islands, the islands that are right next to Argentina, England took them.
And Margaret Thatcher
did. She was the first minister of England.
Okay.
And I was back there. It was in 1982. I was a junior, and there was a war, and in my country was in war because of Margaret Thatcher. I have a second one, Christina Kirchner. She brought the most violence in Argentina in the history of Argentina.
Thank you, Seth.
So I think what you're saying is true, and there's a lot of cases, but there's other cases. I think you're focusing on things that really happened. I think you're right, it happened, but no, women brought a lot of violence.
In any case, both parties are going to commit violence. But if you look at per capita, I think men are more likely to commit violence for reasons that aren't justified than women. And women at least plan things out a little bit.
So you're saying men don't plan things out?
No.
I don't agree with that.
You think?
I mean, it depends. I haven't seen all the war plans of America. I haven't seen all the war plans of different countries. But if you look at the biggest terrorist groups, the biggest groups that have committed mass violence, all of them are led by men. And if you look at the groups that have been led by women, they're much more peaceful per capita.
No, it's just fundamentally not true. Again, they've done analysis per capita. If they've looked at female leaders, historically, they were just as, if not more likely to start wars than men.
But when?
Why would that matter?
Because a lot of women in early years were completely controlled by men, even if they were in power or not. You don't believe that?
No, typically with monarchies, the monarch, especially historically, they had absolute power.
But women aren't in the 16, 17, almost
In
even
the-
1800s.
Well, we're talking about
Women who
hundreds
had
years
power,
of time.
exactly, you are too. Women who had power were raised and taught by only men, and a lot of their decisions were made by men.
What do you mean their decisions were made by men?
They were told what to do. They were told
the-
what is right. They were taught what is right by not women, not like open. You know how like in today's world, schools aren't fully allowed to teach religion if they're a public school and not like a Catholic school? Women who were born into royalty and who they knew they were going to have to be royalty for the rest of their lives were not taught by parties who were like, you know, they were taught by parties who were very much for one thing.
Do you think you
So-
could maybe give an example? I'm sorry. Do you think you can give an example? Maybe.
Marie Antoinette. She's one of my favorite examples. Marie Antoinette was beheaded because she said, quote unquote, let them eat cake, even though she never said that. She was taken from Austria when she was very young and moved to France. She barely even spoke the language. She was married to one of the kings. And then when the king went under, everyone blamed her for being a bad person and for not caring about the poor when she genuinely had no real clue what was going on. She was just kept to be married to the king, and then she was beheaded because she was an evil person. However, she genuinely had no clue what was happening.
Do you have another example?
I'm not completely caught up on English kings and queens, but I've
The reason why
been
I'm-
to Europe and I've heard lots of stories of different queens that have just, even if they had their own mind and even if it's documented that they had their own ideas, you have to understand that at that time, every woman's life was controlled by men. Their father's word was the word of God. They had no clue what was wrong and what was right. And so them believing that whatever a man said, like, let's do war, let's do this, let's whatever, they thought it was correct because that was the only thing they were being told. It's very sad, and a lot of
it is,
women had their
absolutely.
own ability to
Do you want to push
think
back?
things,
You
but-
seem like you want to push back. I got to get up. Go ahead.
I'm not sure entirely about this, but I'm pretty sure in the 1900s, maybe 1800s, in England I think it was for the right to vote, they burned a lot of factories down. Do you think they were led by men to do that?
No, I think they were fighting for their rights.
By burning down factories?
The factories they were forced to work in for no money. Yeah.
You gotta rage when you're like
gotta-
trying to protest and stuff like that. You can't be nice with.
Well, earlier you said that women in leadership roles don't commit violence.
I didn't say that.
In a,
said they're less likely
in a
to.
misogynistic world where everyone is violent, women are going to be violent inherently. They're going to become violent because of the societal, projection of everyone else.
What's your question? Just do you think women?
Well, earlier you said that women in leadership roles commit violence or don't commit violence. And I was just giving you an example of them committing violence.
I don't consider that as big of a violent act as what men in government have created. It's not a genocide. It's not some sort of giant war. It's them saying what we're going through is completely unfair. You're making us work in factories for $0. You're abusing us. You're sexually abusing us, and we're over it. And we want equal rights. A revolution is different than a war or a genocide. But I get your point.
Equal rights as in not having a job or...
No, as in women being respected as the same way as men. Women getting equal pay. Women getting equal hours. I mean, nowadays it's much different. We get very equal stuff somewhat, but back then it was so different.
Somewhat how?
How they got like
Somewhat
dollars
how-
and dollars and dollars less than men, how they got different hours, how they got treated differently by the boss, how they got no respect in the workplace.
No, I mean somewhat how are we treated unequally now?
The wage gap is one example. Sexism
Wage gap?
is the workplace.
What?
Sexism in the workplace.
She said the wage gap.
I mean, the wage gap is one. That's still a thing. You can't deny that. It might have changed in some states. It might have been different, but it's still an issue.
Do you think-
there
do you think that-
is no wage gap. This
But
has been
women-
Yeah,
completely,
that's what I was wondering.
Do you think that
it's
women
been
work
completely
as
debunked by economists. But
But I do think men and women can get paid differently for the same job depending
you.
where that instance is taking place.
Thank you.
As in, there are men that are willing to do my job for free and would sign up and beg to do my job, and I charge money for what I do.
well, really quick on the wage gap. But here, you wanted to go? Go ahead.
Do you think that women work as much as men?
Depends where you're asking. Depends who you're asking. It doesn't
In
matter.
a general basis. Do you
It
think
doesn't
they
matter.
work?
It doesn't
In like the
matter.
office?
Wait, hold
or
on, hold
in,
on.
I think there's
Here, let's do
lazy
this. Explain the wage gap.
If I applied for one job and a man applied for the same job, a boss is more likely to give a man, even if it's just 2 pennies more, a man is more likely to get my job than I am, because a boss who may or might not even be a woman, it's still no. Let's say I'm pregnant and I apply for a job. I probably will get rejected because I'm pregnant. But a man will get that job, even
Okay,
if his
so-
wife is pregnant.
Because
So
you're
you,
gonna-
hold on.
Because I'm going to take a leave of absence.
Yes.
And it's fair to say, listen, you're completely qualified for this job, but in 9 months you're going to give birth. I can't handle that. What if I get the job and I give birth 2 years later?
I would say that when the first hiring process, new hires, they'll want someone that will work for a longer period of time at first.
Do you think that's fair?
Yeah, I think that's totally fair.
Wait, hold on. Aren't you making an advocation that women should occupy a majority of positions of political power? So wouldn't it actually be within your logical framework actually okay for discrimination? You're just okay with discrimination towards men, but discrimination towards women is not okay.
I'm not saying that men shouldn't be allowed to
Aren't-
be in a political space.
Aren't you a female supremacist?
No.
Hold on. You said you're a
Misandrist
misandrist.
is different than a female
but-
supremacist.
The way you explained it earlier.
No, listen. A female supremacist would say men should not be allowed.
I don't think they
I'm
would necessarily say that.
That's what I believe.
I think a male supremacist would say like, oh, well, women could do
No.
these sorts of jobs and, but they wouldn't just outright perhaps ban women from the workforce.
A male supremacist would say women should not be allowed in the political spectrum. And I would
Oh,
say...
well, we're talking about something different now. You're talking about the political spectrum. We were talking about the
I
workforce.
thought you were talking about political.
I thought
By the way,
That's
just to
what
be clear, I'm
conversation
not making an
was, right?
advocacy. I'm not making an advocacy for some supremacy one way or the other. I'm saying this is probably what they would say, but I'm a little confused because you were making an advocation towards, you're saying women are better at XYZ,
Yeah.
ergo they should have an overabundance of representation in politics and the workforce.
I never said that. Okay,
tell me what you did say then.
I personally believe, and I don't speak for everyone in the U.S., I personally believe in a perfect world, women would have a little bit more power. Even if
hold on.
even if they were just
that's not what you said.
equal- Oh, I said women are better.
Okay,